Welcome, Doreen, to Sippin' Sunday, the podcast. Very excited to have you on. Can you let our listeners know what you're sipping on or what your favorite drink is?
So in the morning, I love coffee. And so I'm definitely drinking coffee and trying to be dairy free. So it's coconut milk.
Ooh, same. I have coffee. I don't put regular milk in my coffee. I either do oat milk, sometimes creamer, but I've tried to get away from the bottled creamers and I made my own for the first time, a pumpkin spice one with condensed milk, pumpkin puree, cinnamon, vanilla extract, and I think like a little nutmeg. You just mix it on up. It was good.
Oh my gosh, that sounds amazing. I'm gonna have
Yeah.
to try that.
It's still sugar, like it wasn't actually as sweet, but because when you look at the ingredients on the regular creamers, it's just like stuff you don't even have to
Oh,
put
you
together.
can't even pronounce them.
Exactly. But I agree with the coffee. I have mine as well. And then the next question I love asking everybody is what age do you feel like you became an adult? If you reached that age yet.
Well, I am 58. I still feel like sometimes I'm still adulting, but it's a lifelong journey, right?
Yes.
So I feel like I became an adult right out of college because, when you're in college or in your parents' home, you're not really adulting. And a lot of people go and get roommates and stuff like that. But I actually got married right out of
Okay.
college. And so we kind of adulted as a unit.
Okay.
Yeah, which is kind of interesting.
And that's the first person coming on the podcast with a journey of feeling like they're adulting as a unit with somebody. So super excited for you to get more into that as we continue the conversation. Because we briefly spoke before about what you wanted to hit on here and just how you felt like adulting went for you and your generation. You have kids, now you have grandkids. So it's different at different levels of where you're at and what's
Yeah,
going
yeah.
on. So that's another reason I'm super excited to have you on here. And so you went to college, you got married right out of college. Did you meet your husband in college?
I did. I met him in college. And then he proposed. And do you want to hear our story of like right out of the gate what happened?
Yeah,
So
yes.
we had tons of different like odd jobs and stuff like that. And I had saved up $2,000. I thought I was rich.
I mean,
And we spent
$2,000 was a lot then.
that's a
Now that can
lot.
be gone in a blink of an
Yeah.
eye.
Yeah. But back then, it was like waiting tables and saving every single thing. And so we spent $1,000 on a little tiny Toyota Tercel that had a black interior, no radio, no AC. And then we spent the other 1,000 on our honeymoon. And on the East Coast, everybody goes like south, to
Mhm.
Florida or something like that. But in Colorado, where we grew up, we went to California. And so I think it's kind of interesting that we did start out as a unit because most people don't do that.
No, and I think that the biggest thing that people say they have a difficult time navigating is building community or having people to not necessarily rely on. Adulting, you just feel very isolated a lot of the time. So it brings on challenges on both sides, though, for sure. Like just because you have another person doesn't make it easier, doesn't make it harder. It's just your journey. It is what you're experiencing. But having a person that early on, I think probably helped a lot in the scenarios that you might have found yourself in.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. And we've been together for 35 years. So
Yeah, that's amazing.
it's going to be weird when one of us is gone because
We won't even
used to
speak that into existence. I know people don't live forever, but right now we're here in the now.
that.
So you got out of college, you got married, honeymoon, and then you were doing a lot of different odd jobs you mentioned. So what kind of career did you think you were going to have? And then talk a little bit about where you are and all the in between that got you there.
Right. So when we graduated in '89, there was a recession. So
Sounds
my
familiar.
husband, yeah. And it was super hard to get jobs. So at the time, I have a degree in psychology, and my husband has a degree in electrical engineering. And I wanted to go on ministry with a campus ministry. So I found 200 different places he could apply that had a ministry that I could work at all across the nation. And he got nothing. He got nothing. And then all of a sudden, we come back from our honeymoon. His mom was about ready to get in her hippie van again. She was a college professor. We loaded up her hippie van again to go get an apartment. He was going to co-sign, right? And we got this letter in the mail that said, if you can get to DC in 14 days, you have a job. And we're like, what? This doesn't make any sense. We called and it was like true. And so here's Doreen running around trying to do everything that she wants to do, and God's like, we need you here. And we love living in this area. Like it
Yeah.
was meant to be.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that was my next thing of how did you get here? Because you're from Colorado. Before moving to DC, had you been to DC? Where have you traveled to before that period?
Oh, I've traveled all over because even though my family didn't make very much money, my dad felt like it was really important to see different parts of the United States because it's all different culture and different
Yeah,
people and architecture and food, right? And so our vacations, we would like get in the car and he'd like have us go places. So I'd been to DC multiple times. My
gotcha.
grandparents lived in Pennsylvania.
Oh, okay,
Um,
cool.
yeah. So anyway, I'm kind of back to where he grew up in Pennsylvania, so I'm kind of back on the East Coast.
And so your husband got the job in DC. That's what brought you all out here. And
Yeah.
then what did that mean for you and what you were trying to find? Because you were a psychology major, you had what you thought your plan was in mind, but then this good curveball comes to bring you to DC.
Yes. So it was a good curveball, but it was like total culture shock,
Yes.
right? So it was nuts. I remember, so this is how the job, track went. When we got here, there was this little apartment place that partnered with the patent office where he got his job. And they did a bait and switch. So we came in and it was, oh, this beautiful little apartment, blah, blah, blah. And then when we brought our stuff the next day to move in, they were like, oh, no, that's if you signed the year lease. The month to month is this like little dump that's cockroach infested. That
And
was just
that's
like,
adulting right there. They don't ever tell you the full details. You think you're getting into something and then something else happens. It's one thing after another. So that was your
totally.
first like not sign of adulting, but that was one of your first roadblocks of like, okay, I'm excited, we have jobs, we're moving, like I'm figuring things out, have an apartment. Okay, I have one, but it's not what I thought it was going to be. So now what do we do?
It was terrible. And so you had a choice. You could sign the year lease that was more expensive or the dump for a month. And I was so mad I took the dump because I was going to just go find some other place. But then I learned, it doesn't matter if you have worked since you're 13 years old, like every single break, doing everything under the sun, you have no credit history. So I was like, what? So I got a temp job. And, here I have a degree, right? And I'm like, cashier, and then I'm like, doing all these different things, and then secretary. And so I finally built it up enough and found a better place to work or to live. And they still, of course, had to have somebody co-sign. Like, how demeaning and like embarrassing that, your husband has a federal job, you've worked forever. Oh, it's just awful. So anyway, his dad had a co-sign,
Yeah.
and I was like, what do people do if they don't have parents?
A wonderful question because I, as my listeners know, commend my mom, my dad, and my sister all the time because I would have made it without them. Every journey's your own, but there's so many things that I turn to them for and they helped me with that I realized that if you don't have parents or guardians that are able to support you in that way, it puts you a little bit behind sometimes on basic necessities like getting an apartment, getting a car, like getting a credible adulthood started because you need to show and prove that you can do something that you didn't know you're going to need to show and prove, then you're scrambling to try to figure it out and you don't know where to turn to and you do sometimes feel embarrassed or like, oh, I should have known or I should have done this. And I just tell everybody, no, like you shouldn't have, not you shouldn't have known. That's not like maybe the way to say it, but like nobody knows until you know, or you don't figure
Yeah,
it
you
out
don't know
until
what you
something
don't
comes.
know.
And my goal is to have us not have to get to roadblocks before you figure certain things out, like credit or finances, or like how do you get a house and apartment? Because these are just basic necessities. It's different if you're upset, like your parents aren't buying you $1,000 worth of clothes and jewelry or like phones and stuff like that. That's different. But the basic necessities, I do believe that your parents or guardians, family should be the ones that are helping you. But the reality is that's not always the case at all.
Yeah, not everybody has that. Yeah.
Yeah, not at all. And so your husband's father co-signed for the apartment for you. And then
Co-signed for the
at this
apartment.
time he was in Colorado still,
He
or
was in Colorado.
so how is
Yeah.
that working? Because I know this sounds funny and I'm not trying to date you at all, but
You can date me. I'm fine.
was communication was very different then. There was no
Totally different.
FaceTime. There were not
Yeah.
really reliable cell phones. You had to have the humongous flip phone, the Nokias. So how did that delay your process or anything? Because he's in another state, Colorado, different time zone. You're in DC, trying to get your house, trying to get everything. He's your co-signer. What did that look like? If you can remember how the process.
Actually, I don't remember, but I do know that they had faxes. And I do know the process took a lot longer for all of those things.
Yes. Yes. I
Yeah.
can imagine
Yeah.
because we either had to mail fax, but then you would have to find somebody with a fax machine. They
Yep.
charge you to fax things. They charge you to notarize things. They charge you. Everything's a charge. So yeah, that's just something I wanted to point out because Gen Z doesn't even know about the communication then. I think
Yeah.
even though we get a bad reputation, we were the last generation to know those things and those struggles of like dial-up Wi-Fi. Well, not even Wi-Fi, dial-up internet because it wasn't Wi-Fi.
Yeah. And we didn't even have internet then. So
Yeah.
it was like calling on the phone and mailing
Yes.
things or faxing things. Yeah.
Yes. And I do believe that's also why relationships are stronger among older people because you actually had to talk to people and be intentional about how you saw them. Like you didn't just scroll on Facebook all day and be like, okay, I see that Johnny's doing this. Kate had a baby.
Right.
Okay, Karen's doing this. Okay, I got my updates for the day. Like you had to call somebody and be like, how's it going? Like what's going on? And it wouldn't be quick information received because you
and we wrote letters. Yeah.
Yes, I do still like putting things in the mail. For my
Yeah.
friends, I make an effort to always send them cards for their birthdays. I still like snail mail. I have letters I used to write to my cousins. And even one of my friends, this makes me laugh because she lived down the street from me, but as a kid, down the street seems like it's very far, but she was on punishment and couldn't talk on the phone, so we had to mail letters. So imagine the delay in that, like mailing the letter to her, but I see her in school and then she gets the next letter. So yeah.
By the time you got the mail, it's old news.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, that's all sounds like it was for sure a journey for you, but it got you to where you are, and you stayed in DC since you moved out right out of college, and when your husband got that job.
Yeah, we stayed, and then about 6 months later, I got a job. Oddly enough, I had enough statistics to be a statistician at the Census Bureau, so got my professional job and stuff like that. So, and then later moved into an actual home.
Yes,
bought a home.
And then your career journey, which is how we actually met at CIAA in March. And I'm so glad we finally got to record. I know adulting, life, things are happening.
Life happens.
Yes, but I'm very, very glad that we actually did get to have the time to record and have you on the podcast. So we met because you were at CIAA with your company, there tabling, and you got a career in finances, but it's a little different because it's not the direct like this is what you do, invest. You all, it to me comes across with more of a human approach. You actually are caring about how you are helping people and then the resources and stuff that you offer, and then just you personally from talking to you, that's a lot that aligns with you as well, of giving back, how you want to help people and really coach them through it, not just kind of throw the information at them. So how did you get into the finance from being a psychology major?
Oh, good question. So I've done a billion things, probably because I have ADD, I think. I've done ministry, I've run businesses. The statistician job after maybe 8 years kind of got boring and decided to do a whole bunch of other things. But the way I got into it is kind of interesting. This is sad. So my husband got cancer in 2016, and it was going to derail us. We wouldn't have enough time to finish his retirement. We have an adult daughter who lives at home who has medical issues. I wouldn't be able to get at his retirement funds till a certain age. And I sat with a bunch of different financial advisors and insurance people. And this is the crazy thing. So one of the things that my husband has said after I went into this industry. He wishes that we had advice sooner, because we were doing it ourselves, and you don't know what you don't know, right?
Yeah.
So he had term insurance, and it was about ready to expire. We had always been told, don't buy permanent insurance, blah, 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 blah. Well, here he has cancer. It's supposed to be terrible, and we're going to be derailed, and he's not going to have any insurance, right? So fast forward, he's totally okay, probably never having cancer again. He's probably totally fine.
Amen.
Yeah, God is amazing. But I sat with financial advisors, and I sat with insurance people. I didn't like any of them.
And
I
that's
was like, I can do a better job than they're doing, right? And so it was me wanting to learn for myself what we need to do for the rest of our lives to make sure our daughter's okay, make sure that we're okay, that made me enter that industry. And it's really interesting because as we're doing this, my husband's like, man, you start out, and we even did this, you start out adulting and you get a job, and most, like, some people do have 401ks, or the employer offers things, but nobody tells you what you're supposed to do, how much you're supposed to do, how you're supposed to invest it, or any of that. And it never dawned on us to get a financial advisor, because I used to just talk to my dad about it. And then later, now that I'm in the industry, I'm like, that's like me going to my dad for a dental cleaning and not using a professional. Like, why did it not even occur to me that this is something, and
Yeah.
as I'm applying the things that I'm learning, my husband's like, man, I wish we had learned all this sooner. But
Yeah.
you do the best you can with the information you have at the time, and we're not going to beat ourselves up.
Yeah.
Moving forward,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. Do you feel like your kids listen to like the lessons that you have gone through and try to teach them? Because it is hard when your parents are like, do this, do that, because we're viewing our parents as they're our parents. Not that you don't know what you're talking about, but we're just like, okay, mom, okay, dad. But for me talking to you, you do have a lot of knowledge and wisdom. So do you feel like talking to your kids about this as they've grown up has been easy or difficult? Like, well, how did they kind of receive your journey of life that you've gone through?
So they do listen, I think, on some level, because obviously they're my kids and they trust me. However, there is a dynamic, and this happens with everybody, I believe. If you're a mom, you can tell your kids 100 times something, and then they're not listening. And then all of a sudden they hear it out in the world, somewhere else. And it's the most amazing thing they've ever heard in their lives.
Yes, yes,
It's just
yes.
funny.
And that's why I always tell like people that I meet that have kids and like we're like vibing just how we're talking and having like very similar conversations. We have a similar mindset about a lot of things. I always just refer my website or your Instagram, my Instagram, whatever, to your kids, because we're saying the same thing, but you are their parent, so they might not listen. And
Yeah.
especially when I'm working with like my high school students and it's about college, I'm talking to their parents. I'm like, if you want me to talk to them, please feel free, because I get it. You're saying the right things, but you're their parent. So
Yeah.
they're kind of
Yeah.
like, thanks, I guess, mom. But I would say later down the line, when kids are older, and speaking from my own experience, like
Oh,
they
yes.
have much more gratitude. It's just the stages of life in kids and parents. I think that it's just how it is, because we as the child don't get it. Like we were just brought here. We don't know what's going on. We're learning from somebody that we just are trusting to care for us every day, all day. But when we get older, we realize that they didn't know what they were doing either. They were just here winging it and trying to keep us alive while keeping themselves together, while dealing with work, while dealing with people passing away, cancer. Like it's just so much that you realize when you yourself become an adult and you're just like, wow, my parents did
Yeah.
what they could do with what they knew. And that's all I can be glad about because
Yeah.
I'm here.
Yeah. My dad said it took many, many years for me to realize he had a brain in his head.
Did you just think he's like some guy just floating around like a robot? Like, here we are. No, that is funny. And some of the things that you mentioned as issues for you when you were growing up and getting into adulthood, I actually wrote down before our time, are issues that we are facing now as well. I'm in my 30s. I'm still saying early 30s because it's not mid yet. My birthday just passed. 33. I'm not at the mid. Next year.
You're like, don't put me there
Yeah,
yet.
no. And one of my friends said that. I was like, I am not at the mid 30s yet. I was like, I'm still early in 30s. We're still facing the same issues like with cost of living, cost of living as in houses, apartments, also the cost of school, groceries, basic things to live. So kind of like, what is your thoughts on that the same issues that you felt like you were facing, we are facing, and the generations below are still facing those things?
Yeah. I think we're just going to always face those things. I think adulting is hard no matter what age you go through it, you know. I have a friend who's almost 100,
Ooh,
and
good for him.
she got married during, before like World War One or World War Two, right? And so like she had all these different, everybody has their own journey and everybody has different, issues. And I don't know, I think it's great that you're doing this podcast because it helps people talk about it, feel like they're not alone, and then they can share ideas. And I think any age, adulting's hard.
Yes, it is. And I think like when you're saying somebody is about to turn 100, we're not as far removed from like some of the historic difficulties that were faced, like aside from like economic and stuff, just like the way that the world has changed. But we think that we are, and we really are not at all. So I think what I love about talking to people who are older is realizing that we're not as far removed as we thought from certain things. But then two, we all live the same life in certain ways. Like we have to get a house, we have to get a job, we have to do certain things as a person in the world. And we all usually are struggling with them, like you mentioned. That I also don't think some things will change. Like I think people will struggle with the same things. And that is forever a theme throughout this podcast. Anybody in any question I ask them, it always comes back to community, money, mindset. Like you're just unsure of like what to do, how to figure it out. You hit a roadblock, and that's how you decided to change something. But it's like, I want you to change things before you get to the roadblock. And that's what I'm hoping from what I talk to people about in their journeys, and just that things are going to be difficult, but how you think about it and how you approach it is what can be different.
Yeah. Yeah. And learning from other people.
Yes, exactly. You have to be open to learning, which a lot of people are not. And I just knew I never wanted to be a person that wasn't still continuously learning and growing and just talking to people, because that's how you are going to learn and grow. And even when you mentioned the travel piece, that's how you just understand that there's something bigger and more things out there than your own 4 or 5 blocks that you grew up on as a kid.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
The Mel Robbins podcast I listened to, one time I was getting my hair done, my hairstylist was listening to it, and I've tuned into a couple episodes since. And just this week, the episode I was listening to, she said that people don't talk to strangers anymore, and that's how you can really start to.
That's sad.
Yeah, but they don't, because they're just in their phones all the time, or like just passing people by in a rush. They're not actually stopping to see their surroundings and be present. And if we get back to that, I think things can get better for sure, because that's how you just build connections. Like you were a stranger when we walked up. If I was
like if
oh,
I hadn't
hi,
like
bye.
walked the booths, like you and I chit chat, and we'd like not even be here right now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
For sure. So yeah,
That's
my brain, every single episode, my brain just starts spinning of like all the good things and all the conversation that can be had, because I really could just be doing this all day, because it's it's like a mess. The other thing that I wanted to see in your journey of life so far, is there anything that you wish you would have done differently? And I won't say you have known before, because you kind of touched on a couple of those things, but anything you would have done differently?
done differently? Well, we definitely would have had a financial advisor for education. We definitely would have built up credit. That's something that I had my girls
Mhm.
do. A lot of banks don't do it now, but we found a bank that did a secured credit card where you
Mhm.
give, they had to give $500 to the bank, and then they'd use their credit card. It's kind of like a debit card, but it's actual credit card. And then you have to pay it off every month. And then that built up some credit,
Gotcha.
so that when they got out, they had some credit that was building up, which is really, really key because most people don't have any credit. Um,
Yeah.
so I wish we had done that. That was a big part of it.
Is built your own credit. But when you were growing up, that's when credit just was introduced as well. Like, because credit's like relatively new. Again, we're not far removed
Right,
from
right.
when credit actually started. I'm actually about to Google it. When did
Yeah,
credit?
yeah. Well, I do remember when we graduated in 1989, there were a bunch of people wanting to give us credit cards. And I think that's one of the issues that a lot of young people have now, that I run into, is like a lot of people don't understand how to use it properly. And they suck you in, and yeah, it just gets to be a snowball.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As it says, the first credit card, as we understand in the modern sense, it came out in 1950 in New York City.
Oh my gosh.
That's what it says.
It's probably something to do with Macy's. No, I don't know.
It says the Diners Club card, whatever that was.
Oh, so you could go to fancy restaurants and pay it off
That's
later.
what it sounds like for sure. And then, yeah, that's what it says. But it says the concept of credit was like in the 1800s, but the credit card was 1950. Yeah.
It's funny.
Yeah. And then lastly is just what advice do you have to younger adults that are just trying to navigate this world and think that this is a crazy place?
Yeah. I think building community is one of the um, biggest factors to surviving and to success. And I think it's one of the things that's the hardest thing now, especially like you said, like we're on our phones, we're all isolated, we're not like in public gatherings, we're on Zoom, or we're on, Um, and so I think even though I was adulting with my husband as a unit, I think it was really important that we had built community. So like when we first moved here, I remember I was in total culture shock, and it was just like, what? Um, and there, my dad had said to one of his friends that was here, take my daughter in, show her the ropes. And they took us to church, and there was this young married group there, and they did all these fun activities. And so Jim and I were like, yeah, let's join this group. And that provided like a basis of some community to begin with, right?
Mhm.
And then as our kids got older, we purposely made sure that we joined Girl Scouts and community
Oh yes,
groups, and
I
that
love
we,
Girl Scouts. I was a Girl
yeah,
Scout.
yeah, I'm a Girl Scout. And all these community groups to build community. And so one of the things, and I'm sure this happens in Baltimore also, but in DC, it's very transitional. So people are moving in for the government and out for the government, in for the military, out for the military. And people move here and then they move away for other reasons. And so
Yeah.
it's, you build up a community and then they all move away. Right. And so that's a different challenge than the small hometown people, building community. And so what Jim and I have figured out is that we just embrace it, because these people that are our community right now, we're learning from them. They're learning from us. They may be
Yeah.
gone later. Right. But community is a part of success for everybody. And I think you have to be intentional and take time and energy building those relationships and joining organizations, because that is what's going to get you through. And that's your safety net. And those are the people that are
Yeah.
going to help you. And I think that's one of the biggest key things to adulting that like would help people.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that people always ask about a lot. And I always feel like I'm sounding repetitive, but it really is because I meet people from doing my podcast, from doing pop-up events, from doing speaking engagements, and no matter the group, whether it's college students, it's adults, it's high school students, like people always ask about how do you make friends? How do I find things to do? And when I ask my current students that are in high school, like, what do you all like to do? a lot of them are like, oh, play video games, just stay in the house, hang out with my friends. And I'll be like, well, what are you doing when you hang out? They're like, nothing, just like in the house playing games. And I'm like, well, do you go to like the museum? Do you go to the park? Do you take a walk? Like, ride your bikes? Like, what's the common thing kind of bringing you all together to have fun and explore and like try something new? Because sitting in the house is fine, but what I just tell them is like, you have your whole life and you're never going to get these years back. So you should do as many new things as you can, get out there and go to different community groups. Because I have not met a Boy Scout that popped in my head at all, I think, in any of the students I've met. And now I'm going to start asking them. Girl Scouts, I for sure have known that some girls have been a part of it that I've met with in my student groups. But I really can't think of any boys that I've met, like any young men that have been like, oh, yeah, I'm a Boy Scout, or like I'm a part of some type of group at all.
Well, you know, the reason you might not is they are very organized and very good at doing a lot of activities already. So those people are probably really intent, like they already have a bunch of stuff going on. So they're not going to like maybe join other groups because they already have that community.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. No, that's true. But I'm gonna start asking teens again, like, are you a Girl Scout or have you done Boy Scouts? Because I feel like those two things are the into learning about other things. Because I remember
Oh,
we
yeah.
would take the trips to like we did one to Domino's once and we made pizzas behind. We went like behind the scenes at McDonald's. We went to the Space Center. We went to the Science Center or Science Museum and we got to like sleep overnight there. It was a lot of cool things. Like the horseback riding. So it was all a great time for sure.
That's so cool. Yeah, I remember Girl Scouts. It was awesome.
And selling the cookies, of course. That is what everybody
Oh my
loves.
gosh.
That is what everybody looks forward to. Even though the prices have gone up, they're like $4 or $5 a box. And then if you want to ship them, because you can buy them online now, obviously, you
Right,
have to
right.
buy like at least $30 worth of cookies for them to even ship it. It's crazy. It's really a
I
crazy.
have a funny story about that. I sold so many Girl Scout cookies because I want back then you could do like you got prizes and there was like a
Yes, I
record player
remember.
I wanted. And back then you just took the order, you didn't take the money. And I lost the sheet. I had walked the whole little town I lived in, and my mom was ready to kill me because we didn't
Oh
know what
my
went where.
God. Yeah, that's a problem because again, everybody listening, there was no phones, there was no
Yeah,
computer, there was no backup drive. Your
yeah.
paper was the order form, and that
You
was
couldn't even take a picture of the order form to make sure you
no,
yeah, it was just like, yeah.
no. So then it's like you have to walk back around and be like, what did you order? But I mean, they probably didn't even remember either. They were just like, give me whatever. Here's the money. Thank you. That is funny. As you were talking before, one thing I did want to ask is, at what age did you have kids? Because I know that we talked a lot about you and your husband navigating adulting as a unit, his journey with cancer, but then somewhere along the line, kids came and they were in this. So you're navigating then you and your husband, then your husband's health journey, then your own career, and then you had kids. So
Yeah, yeah. So I actually had kids first,
okay,
right? Well, I was at the Census Bureau. We waited 5 years. So we were in our townhome for let's see, apartments for 2 years. And then, no, that's not right. We were in apartments for 3 years, the townhome for 2 years, and then we had kids because we wanted some alone time.
yeah,
And then we had two girls. So I remember my goal, and this is a crazy goal because nowadays, like all my friends and all the people I know, they're getting pregnant like in their 30s. That's like more normal. Like you get established and then you do your career, whatever.
yeah.
So, but my goal was to get them done by the time I was 30. And I ended up doing something stupid. So I had both of them before I was 30. And then that's actually why I ended up leaving the Census Bureau too. I went part-time. I was one of the first people back then. You couldn't go part-time. You had to go to the office. It was full-time. And they were
Yeah,
just
no
starting to
remote work or
explore.
very minimum remote work for your job.
Yeah. Yeah. And no remote really. And so but they were exploring part-timers. So I did part-time. Had a friend that watched my daughter. And then when the second one came, I was like, no, I want to do other stuff. So I started a couple of businesses and did a whole bunch of ministries at church. And then later did the financial advisor thing. Um, Best years of my life, hardest years, but it was really good. And those were some decisions that actually have affected us now because we purposely chose for me to take less of the salary to be more intentional about like being able to work around them. And we had to decide when we bought our house, we want a smaller house so that we don't have to, be strapped. And so we had a smaller house. And we don't have as much retirement because I didn't have as much money putting in, so my husband's having to work longer and we're like, so there are decisions you have to make early on that kind of affect you. But I'm really glad we had the girls. Yeah. So now I'm a grandma. Yay.
Yes, so exciting. Just welcome the two twins. We love that.
Yeah.
And then the other question that I wrote down, I take avid notes as I'm doing this, one, because I will forget things, but two, people are saying great information and stuff that I want to just remember and be able to give back to the listeners and social media, all that stuff. But you've been married for 35 years, which I think in our time as well, I am not married, I'm not in a relationship, but just from seeing what people are posting on social media and how people are talking about relationships, that has also very much changed. It's either like hot and cold. There's not many in between people when it comes to their views on a relationship. This is just my thoughts from social media specifically. What is your advice for a successful marriage and relationship to make it to 35 plus years?
Oh, good question. So I think one of the problems with our media today is they romanticize all of this stuff, right?
And some
And
things can be romanticized, but some things we need to just keep it off social media and really get in front of people, get into the world, and like do what is best for you.
yeah. And the other thing to that is our culture is like, if it feels good, do it, right? And so love is a decision and it's an action, right? And so the love feelings are going to come and go, right? But you do the loving thing and you keep doing the loving thing, and then the feelings come back. And so my husband and I knew that going in. And so we're a partnership and we work really hard at everything. And the feelings come and go, but we are committed to each other. And we know by doing the loving actions, the feelings will come back. And I think that's something, if you watch rom-coms and all of that, like, love is the most important thing. Well, that's a feeling. Love is not a feeling, it's an action. And so I think because we went in knowing that, it's helped us kind of weather the storms.
Yeah.
So.
No, that is amazing. That is very beautiful because one, a lot of my friends now are starting to get married. So I've just been asking people that are married or are in long-term relationships, just like, what is the secret? Not, well, I won't say secret because it's not a secret. What is the tips and tricks for successful marriages and just relationships? Because obviously it has to work for you and your partner, but there are some things, just as we talked about with adulting, that kind of are constants of like, this is just what helps people be successful in this arena. And you've
Right.
had some bumps in the road, as you mentioned. So, starting off as a pair, I kind of think from hearing it has strengthened you all because you started together knowing that we're already just choosing to do this together and see where it turns out. So, hearing and thinking about backwards now, everything you've said, I feel like makes sense of how this turned out. And that's why like you all have had the journey you've had. And life really does make sense when you think about it backwards. You're like, this was difficult, or I don't know why I'm going through this, but later down the line, you're like, okay, I know that I'm now prepared for this, or I went through this similar situation, so I know how to navigate this better.
Right. Yeah.
And then, oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think it also helps that we both look to God.
Amen.
We've actually been through a lot of different trials, which could be a whole different podcast. Like we're actually in a book. We're in a chapter in a book from all the terrible things that happened over like a 10-year period.
Oh my God.
Yeah. But because we both look to him and ask him to help us, I think that helps too, that we have a common bond that way, maybe.
No, and that makes sense. And I think there's another episode I had with somebody who is a mindset coach, but like they don't focus specifically on spirituality and God, but they strongly believe in God, and it does lead some of their thoughts and practices, and also depends on the client because the reality is everybody doesn't believe in the same things. But that's another theme I've seen is people have faith in something. Most people, it is in God that I have spoken to, but people need to have faith in something and believe something bigger than yourself because we can't just rely on ourselves to keep us motivated all the time because you said too people do what feels good and going to work every day doesn't feel good. Paying your bills does not feel good.
Adulting does not feel good.
Yeah, exactly. But you have to do it because it's for the future. Like you're being proactive and like making small steps and doing small things to have a better life later on is what the hope is. Like you're building your life. So if you decide like I just want to eat cookies every single day, like you're not going to be healthy later. Maybe right now you feel great, but down the line it's not going to work out for you.
Totally.
And lastly, I know I said lastly last time, but we kept going through so many other like great things that you had to share. When I asked people on the podcast the past couple episodes if they have a question that they would like to ask me, it could be about my business, it could be about me personally, my journey, literally any question you'd like to ask.
Okay, so I want to ask you one of the questions that you had sent me. You didn't ask. What are your thoughts of generosity and giving back on your adulting journey?
Yes,
I
yes.
want to hear your answer.
Yes. And then after, if you have anything that you wanted to add in or share about that, because I know we touched on just your values and your philosophy of life that you've gone through on this journey. But yeah, so giving back, I think that like again, when you think about your life, I started off, I was a Girl Scout, then I was involved in high school, but like not super, super involved. I would say like college is when I became really, really involved. And the first thought I think that I kind of was like, I want to give back or I want to do something for other people intentionally was after graduating college and being involved on campus and being like, yeah, I want to come back and talk to people that are about to graduate. I want to come back and talk to the first year students and I want to um do X, Y, and Z to help somebody that can see me doing what I'm doing. And maybe they want to do that or they can figure out something for themselves. So I think that's the first intentional time that I was like, okay, I want to give back. And then going along, kind of similar with you and the financial advisors, that none of them were good. I was thinking about like educators or professionals along my journey that I kind of would see, and they weren't bad at their job. They just, in my opinion, weren't the best at working with young people because they either would just kind of like talk down or be nasty or even just say like, well, this is how it is or this is what my journey was, so this is what you have to do. And my approach has always been that I'm going to tell you what I feel like will work best, but this is your journey and you can do what you would like to do, make the decision for yourself. I can help guide you, but I'm not going to make a choice for you. Like this is your life to live and I want to kind of like be a trusted and caring adult for them. And so I feel like that's another form of giving back is allowing them to have a space where they can be themselves and do things that they might not be able to do in another space, whether that's because somebody's like shaming them or they just don't have somebody to talk to, whatever it is. And then as even going through my journey of getting back into like watching church, listening to church, it's funny I put on this shirt today, kind of forgetting that we even talked about spirituality and God and everything, that even when I started watching back, like I kind of was trying to understand more for myself the monetary giving part. And I think that giving doesn't have to be monetary. I think that's what people associate giving with. That like you just have to give money, and if I can't give money, then like I'm not gonna give anything. But giving is your time, your words, your energy, just how you're showing up and what you're putting out into the world. So even aside from the Adulting Queen as its platform, me personally, I just give back by my time and my energy and coaching and inspiration and motivation, serving as like a mentor and doing all those things for my students and even for my friends, I would say too. Even though I don't always think about it in that way, but like I definitely know that I have helped a lot of my friends In the future, I would for sure love to give in monetary ways from my business as it continues to grow, because there are so many avenues, as we've talked about, just with like nonprofits and youth development and things like that, that will greatly impact the futures of other people that are trying to make it in this crazy world as an adult. For sure.
That's so cool. I think you're doing important work.
Thank you. And I know that there's not anybody doing it in this way either, because what I've seen when I look it up is people just saying, like, just do X, Y, and Z, or they're not really talking about it. They'll just be like, open a credit card, pay your bills on time, get a house. There is a lot of stuff that happens in between that that you have to do, or there's like a lot of questions. So it's like, I just want people to share their journeys, talk to each other, and be able to know that you'll never have it always figured out, but you're going to make it and it's going to be fine, because your generation and generations before have done it. They've made it. Was it hard? Yes, but they have made it.
It's cool. That's awesome.
Yeah, yeah. I definitely have always been in like giving places, and even just being an educator, especially outside of the classroom. Like, we joke that like education is a thankless job, but it really is a thankless job for sure. More so now, I'd say, from adults than kids, because my students have been super appreciative over the past two jobs I've had, and my past ones too, but specifically working with high school students. Like, they've been super appreciative, which I think I wouldn't have thought initially, and not because of them, but they're kids. Like, they're learning, they're growing. Like, you don't know what you don't know. So if you don't tell me thank you, I'm not gonna not do my job. Like, this is my job to, to help you. So, but people also don't have that mindset. So yeah.
That's awesome.
And are there any final words of inspiration, anything else that you would like people to know about your journey? And then if there's any ways that they can connect with you, whether that's LinkedIn, or any social media platforms, and or the resources that you offer from your full-time work, if you'd like to talk about that.
Oh, yeah. So I just do think adulting is hard. I think it's really important to plug into community. I love that Amber's doing this podcast. I think it's really important work. Um, I would love to connect with people. I'm not here representing my company right
Yes,
now.
yes, yes.
But you can find me on social media. And you can also reach out to Amber and she can get you my contact information.
Yes. But no, thank you. I absolutely loved you coming on here. And I'm almost like, as you were talking, I was like, we might need to have you and your husband on at one time if he is open to it, because I think that that still would be great to hear his side of like,
Oh, right. From a male perspective.
and then just like the unit together again of how this has come about. I think that would be awesome.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I've gotten more males on this season because I was intentional about that, because many males, they'll talk individually, but I feel like when you think about getting on this type of platform where we're talking about, it can sometimes be difficult. But I've gotten more males on here, and I think that they have value. Literally every person has value to add.
Oh, totally.
But they
And everybody has their own journey. Yeah. And things that they can share and learn from each other. Yeah.
Yeah. But thank you again so much. I really appreciated it.
Oh, thank you for having me.